What an amazing episode with the absolutely formidable Veda Austin. Veda, the woman that really needs no introduction, but Veda is a water researcher, author, artist, and mother of three. And for nearly a decade, she's been photographing water in a state of creation, the state between liquid and ice that she believes is responsive to consciousness. This is an incredible episode, and we talk about Veda's introductory work into photographing water and the importance of her egg experiments, which I feel demonstrate visibly the power of what happens when we heal ourselves, and the incredible observations she had as to really, if we heal ourselves, we can heal those around us. I was moved to tears throughout this podcast. You're going to have to listen in to the whole episode. It's impossible to do justice to it. But we talk about life, death, the consciousness of water. We discuss homeopathy and how her work on water can help enlighten us as to how remedies may work. If you want to hear more, you're going to be able to see her book coming out later next year, which I really cannot wait to get my hands on. And if you want to connect with Veda, the links are in the show notes. This is the final episode of this season of Raw Health Rebel while I take a much needed break. And just what a note to end on. I couldn't be happier that we ended with this amazing transformative work that Veda is doing. And I really, really believe that her work has the implications to unlock so many secrets about our world, and it's fascinating. It really is. This is a rediscovery of lost information. So listen in and let me know what you think. So Veda, thank you so much for coming on. We've just been having a really good chat before we actually hit record, and I'm really excited about all of Veda's work and everything that's in the pipeline, and seeing your work that's in development. Veda, before I get you to introduce yourself, if that's okay, I just want to ask you, I wanted to ask you before I hit record, but I thought, no, I'll wait. Are you ever not amazed by what you see? Like, as homeopaths, even though we do it day in, day out, when a remedy reacts in the way we know it will act, we're still like, oh my God, it's so amazing. It's like witnessing magic. Do you ever lose the magic from what you see?
No, no, it never gets old. It never gets kind of boring. For me, I'm in a constant state of amazement every time. And one of the reasons for that is that I don't ever expect water to do anything. So what I mean by that is that the moment I actually think that I know what water is going to do, or even worse, assume that I know what water is going to do, it won't play with me like that. The crystallography will design something different, or it just won't design complex imagery. For me, this is about learning the ways of love. This is about not expecting water to do what I want or experimenting on it, but creating an environment where it feels safe enough to share its most deepest and intimate secrets.
Wow, that is the definition of love, isn't it? That's amazing. Yeah. And I sensed that when you were sharing with me. I was like, oh my God, like I could just feel that from you. So thank you so much. So for people that everyone will have heard of you, but can you briefly explain in your own words, introduce yourself to my audience? I'm going to be recording the preamble before this goes out, but can you introduce in your own words? I always think it's nice to have that for the listeners.
Sure.
Thank
Well,
you.
there's always people that don't know me or that don't know what I do. So I am a water researcher, and my area of specialty is in something called crystallography, which is just a fancy way of saying that I photograph a certain stage of freezing after water has been inspired by some way or something. And what I am proving is that water not only stores information, but shares information within this crystallographic realm. And I'm also seeing that water not only reacts to consciousness, but responds to consciousness through imagery. And when I first began this work, which was 10 years ago, and I have been freezing water now nearly, not every day, but nearly every day for 10 years, you definitely become an observer and a real keen observer of the subtleties that happen with water in this freezing process. In the very early stages, before I developed my freezing technique, I would freeze water solid because there were three people who inspired me to begin this work. There was Masaru Emoto, of course, people have heard of him, who really opened the door for people to see themselves as bodies of water that are sensitive to thoughts and sounds and feelings and environment. There is my friend, Laurent Costa, who is a French microscopic photographer taking photos similar to Emoto. However, he never wanted to experiment on water because he considered water to be his spiritual teacher. So occasionally he would smile at the water, and down the microscope, he was photographing smiley faces smiling back at him. He was photographing hearts. He was photographing things that were relative to something that had happened in his day that was perhaps in his subconscious. It was very interesting because he was seeing imagery, pictures, as opposed to geometries. He also got geometries, but his pictures, these depictions of things really captivated me. And then there was someone called Thomas Hieronymus, who was a radionic engineer. And he made an interesting observation that when he went to a Parisian meat market on a really cold day, he noticed that the freshly placed organs of an animal appeared to be affecting the way the frost froze on the glass behind them. For example, the frost would freeze into the shape of a liver organ above a liver organ, and so on and so forth. And his hypothesis was there seemed to be some kind of life force energy still emanating out of these organs, even though they weren't attached to an animal anymore. And he put that down to there being water in the blood. And each organ has something called a sonic signature, which is essentially a bit like a cymatic pattern for form and function. And so because the blood was still very fresh and it hadn't all coagulated yet, and he believed that this water in the blood was sharing information with the water in the air, and the water in the air then took that information, and as it hit the glass, it froze into the form of the information that was shared with it. So that really interested me because he was seeing it with his naked eye. And that encouraged me because 10 years ago I didn't have a microscope, but I was very curious, and I could see from those three examples that the secret was in the freezing, where the unseen becomes seen. And I think that that's a very overlooked stage sometimes. It's like we think about water in this fluid stage. We very rarely ever think about their water being water in the air, for example. Even the fact that we breathe out means there's water in the air, but because we can't see it, we don't think about it very often. But this freezing stage, there's so much to it. And there's three ways that water communicates. And there's also three ways that water freezes. So in my work, water tends to freeze, firstly, in the stage that I take it out now, which I'm going to talk about and how I got there. Then there is the second freeze where there's two layers of ice with water in the middle. And then there is a solid block, a block of ice. And so that first freeze is where there's liquid on top and ice underneath. And I tip the liquid away and photograph the ice that's stuck to the dish. That's not how I began. I began simply by having a petri dish of water, and I was going to project a thought into it because I saw that Emoto, was using all different kinds of things like that. And I thought, well, I'm going to try that. And there was a little bit of fluff floating around in the dish. So I thought, oh, God. So I put my hand in to take out the fluff. And I thought, oh, I wonder if my hand will impact the water's so-called memory and quotes, because I didn't know if that was real. And so then I thought that thought will do. And I pushed it and put it into the freezer with all the peas and the broccoli and everything. And I just forgot about it. And I came back a few hours later and I held it up to the light and I took my first photo of 100 and, no, how many is it now? 44, nearly 45,000
Wow.
photos of water responding in this way. And the image in the ice was of a very, very clear hand that looks like an X-ray of a hand. And so I started doing a lot of this work thinking first, is it just a coincidence? So I got seawater and froze a thin layer of that, and I saw this amazing fish. And this continued on for a year until I started to discover the fourth phase of water. So as I started to just learn more about the fourth phase of water, Dr. Gerald Pollack wrote a book called The Fourth Phase of Water, but Dr. Marcel Vogel also talked about the fourth phase of water, but gave it a different term. But that stage is really where water is more viscous, it absorbs more light. It's actually H3O2. It's got an ordered molecular structure and it has negative charge. That's the kind of water inside of our cells.
Mm.
And you can also find it inside water, certain waters, particularly water that's been under pressure. So like spring water, for example, that's come from a deep aquifer. Now, what's interesting is that when water begins to freeze, but before it's frozen, it creates fourth phase water. Same thing in the melting stage. So I
Mm.
wondered, wonder if I can see that stage in the freezer. I wonder when these patterns are starting to form. So I started to open the freezer earlier and earlier. And when I looked inside, I saw this liquid on top, and you can see the ice underneath it. And so I thought that was really interesting. So I literally just took it out. The water naturally tipped away when I held it up. And I realized that this first freeze is one of the most potent ways to see this crystallographic picture expression
Mm.
because it's a quantum leap, really, from the way I used to freeze water compared to the way I freeze it now. The
Mm.
solid means you have got layers on top of that first freeze. So it's amazing to me when I look back at my work for that year that I did, that I got any imagery at
Mm.
all. So water must have really, really wanted to tell me something. And it was very patient with me to figure out how to actually look deeper
Mm.
to find this method, of which now I've taught thousands of people.
Mm.
And many, many other people are also seeing imagery or something called a signature pattern or hydroglyphs. So this is the way water communicates in the three ways, just in the three ways, same three ways in a way that there's a lot of ways that I'm talking about there of how it will either freeze in three patterns or communicate in three ways. The first way of communication is a signature pattern. So that is where you can identify different waters based on the patterns that they show you. Then you can have the art, which most people know my work from, and then you have hydroglyphs. And a hydroglyph is something I'm getting a little more scientific attention for because of the amount of repeatability.
Mm.
So a hydroglyph is essentially a symbol in ice that is connected to a word influence, where I'll write a word on a piece of paper, put my dish of water on top of it for 30 seconds, remove and freeze. And if I see the same symbol appear using the same word at least 50 times, then I have one hydroglyph. And there are multiple words attached to one symbol. So that's been 5 years of work, and I have
Wow.
about 41 hydroglyphs. It's literally reading the language of water.
It's incredible. And people need to, there's so much we could cover. Like I was saying before we started, there's so many, I mean, it's just vast. And I went to your talk in Kent, which was like 5 hours, and we still could have like listened to so much more. So people should go to your Instagram page to see some of these visuals, perhaps while they're listening to this. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple, go and actually look at some of these images so you can really understand. I'm sure most of you have seen them, but you can understand Veda's work. So what's your Instagram profile? We'll go at the end as to where to contact, but just if people want to do it while we're talking, it's Veda Austin Water, isn't it?
It's, yeah, Veda Austin underscore water.
Okay. So one of the things that I'm really fascinated about is the egg experiments that you did and freezing the egg, because I feel the message of the power of self-healing and looking after ourselves really comes out through those experiments. Can you talk a little bit more about those to the listeners?
Yeah, no, I love doing the egg work. Well, it all stemmed from this question I had, well, what would be the most informed water? And I always thought it would have to be amniotic fluid. And
Mm.
since that's not readily available, I thought, well, what about eggs? You know, they're in this incredible container, this container of life. And I had easy access to someone at the time who had hens, so I was able to get really fresh, free range eggs. So when I started freezing the albumin, which essentially, if you crack open an egg, and most people that have done any cooking with eggs would know there's this gloopy gelatinous bit that kind of tries to like fall out. Well, the egg albumin I'm talking about is there's kind of two parts to the egg white. There is that gloopy part, but then there's a thin part that runs out more like saliva. If you
Mm.
crack the egg very carefully, a thin part usually comes out first. You let that fall into your dish, as much of it as you can, and then you freeze that for about 10 minutes or however long it takes until you start to see patterns form. And I identified 6 patterns in the egg albumin of a free range hen egg. And I named them because as far as I know, I know I'm the first. I know that I'm the only person talking about this. So I don't know if I'm the only person that's ever discovered it, but who knows? But at this point, I think so, from what I'm being told. And so then I thought, well, what would a caged hen egg look like if you did the crystallography for that? And so I cracked that open, and it only could form maximum 2 of the most rudimentary of the 6 patterns.
Mm.
And I thought that was really sad. But I did it. Actually, I've done that now, God, thousands of times for both, probably a couple of thousand.
Wow.
Uh, and so I always see same patterns for caged hen eggs, and I always see the same patterns for a free range egg. And someone once tried to see whether or not that was true. And so they simply put a bunch of them in a egg dish, like, the things that eggs are in, the container
Mm.
for eggs,
Mm-hmm.
and like got a whole thing of caged hen eggs and put like just one free range egg in there. And I haven't actually told this story, but it is really relevant to the story that's coming. And so we put the free range egg in there, but they didn't tell me where. And this actually was only for a few seconds. It's like,
Mm.
how somebody has like a thing that covers a ball and you move the thing around and then you have to find the ball. And that's
Mm.
how quick it was. And then we did it. But it was very clear the caged hen eggs looked different than the free range egg. But then I started to wonder, well, and this is how it stemmed. Well, what happens if you left it there for any period of time? What if you
Mm.
put a caged hen eggs around, or what if the first thought actually was, what if you put a free range egg next to a caged hen egg and left them overnight? See what would happen. And I was inspired by the work of Luc Montanur, who sadly passed recently, who whose work was where he did many things. He got a Nobel Peace Prize for discovering AIDS. He was a very serious scientist, but he got a lot of flack for this particular work he did with water, where he had 2 vials of water, one with a strand of DNA and one without. They sat side by side. For 17 hours, there was a copper coil around it. It was a 7 hertz frequency. They were left in ambient light. So when he came to check the water that had nothing in it, they found, when they put the precursor to see if there was any DNA strands at all or anything in there, they actually found
Mm.
DNA in it. It was called DNA teleportation, which sounds crazy amazing. And I'm like, oh, let's just see what's going to happen if there's a free range egg and a caged hen egg side by side. And I did that. And what was interesting to me was that the free range egg stayed beautiful, but the caged hen egg had started to improve. And when I shared that on social media, people were like, oh, that's really cool. But what happens if you surround it by bad eggs? Surely
Mm.
it's going to go bad. That was the assumption. So I've done that twice where I did controls. I had my, beautiful free range egg in the middle, surrounded it by caged hen eggs, all from the same batch. And what we saw was healing by proximity in both tests. We saw that the caged hen eggs that were closest to the free range egg that had been left overnight literally had taken on the patterns of the free
Wow.
range egg. And the ones that were further away had improved, but not as significantly. So the longer it seemed, the longer the caged hen egg sat beside the free range egg, the more improved they got. So when you put that into terms of human beings,
Mm.
it simply is that if you heal yourself, you're naturally healing others. And the longer you heal yourself for, the more the impact is. And I also did this with tap water and spring water, where I got tap water because I know its signature pattern is very disordered, and spring water, its signature pattern looks like a six-pointed star, which kind of like I call them star fern hexagons because that's what they look like. And side by side, left them overnight. I also checked the pH of them both, and the
Mm.
pH of the spring water was actually quite high. That particular one was one that I had a healing experience with. So it was about a 9.6. And the tap water was about a 7.1, something like that. But the next day, first I checked the pH of them both. The spring water had stayed the same, but the tap water's pH had actually gone up by 2, which is really crazy.
Wow.
And then I did the crystallography, and I'd done the crystallography already. So I let that melt, and then I do the tests to see what happens more long term. And so what we saw was that the patterns of the tap water had improved significantly, which that part didn't surprise me so much. But what did surprise me more was that the crystallography of the spring water had even improved. That it
Wow.
started actually it made a heart as well. So shape in there. So I think that when something is given purpose, it
Mm.
kind of actually also flows over into others. And so that's why I think, healing yourself and finding purpose, we see this reflected in every avenue of my work, how significant and important those two things are.
It's amazing. And that is the message that I want everyone that's listening to hear. Like do and it can be in today's world, I think it can be quite sometimes feel disheartening when you see sort of what's going on out there. But actually knowing that it's not completely hopeless, because if we all do heal ourselves, we will spread that out there. So I think it's
I
incredible,
think,
your work.
thank you. I think there's two worlds. I think there's the one we live on and the one we live in. And
Mm.
everything in the world that we live in is felt through our senses, so to speak. So, we see the outside world, but it's coming in through the lens of our eyes. We hear the outside world and all the sounds and the music and everything. It's coming into the body. When we touch, the sensation is felt in through the body. Taste is felt into the body. Intuition is felt within the body.
Mm.
All of these different kinds of things are felt within this body, this liquid realm. So everything that we are sensing, feeling, is felt in the body. And so how we perceive the outside world is all formulated from within this liquid realm. But is there anything where we're not actually using this extra physicality to experience the world through senses? And I'd say that we can also be the observer of ourselves. We can observe ourselves separate to senses. So people that have ever had a psychedelic experience or journey, anyone who have had some kind of deep meditation where they've observed themselves, some people
Mm.
can just observe themselves. You can also observe yourself in dreams. So
Mm.
what is this observer aspect that is the witness, if you will? And that's where we get a little deeper into the idea of water and spirit and electrical charge potentially being the tether of the spirit, which enables it to actually exit the body, to observe, to do whatever. And because we are alive, we're giving off some electrical charge, which can be measured by heart math, which is not woo-woo. And there's water in the air also that is attracted to electrical charge. So we have this kind of web around us of information, both exchanging it from the internal, external worlds, which comes in as intuition. But then there's these subtle layers, where this witness is able to watch things without judgment,
Mm.
observe them, record them without judgment. And this is a really interesting part, because when I've interviewed a number of people that have had near-death experiences, and they will often say they have this sense of rising, and then
Mm.
they look down upon their body being resuscitated, and they observing. They
Mm.
aren't in judgment. They're not even attached to the physical body at all. They're watching. And so when a gas expands, it's like, this is that some people talk about death as feeling like, the people that have had near-death experiences, obviously, there's like taking off an uncomfortable shoe. The expansion is so great. And
Mm.
there's such a different perspective. It's of everything. And so I've gone on a tangent, but I find that topic fascinating. And I think the more we study water, I think
Mm.
that at some point the science will catch up to a level where we might be able to see this vapor or this type of water actually exit the body.
That's
Because
amazing.
I do think that people can come back into their body, even if there is the slightest bit of electrical charge. Dr. Jerry Pollack, when I interviewed him, I've done a few different things with Jerry, he's a friend of mine now, and he said that one of his team did some experiments with chicken eggs, as they did just as the actual chicken embryo, sorry, but before it had become a full bird.
Mm.
And you can grow a chicken in an egg, and they stopped the heartbeat at something like 3 days or something like that. And it wasn't in its formed state yet. So they stopped it because they wanted to see whether or not this fourth phase water that is in all our cells, right, how quickly it would drop off at death and
Mm.
with all the other things. And so they made an interesting observation that it did stop, like moving to a certain level, but it didn't completely stop. But when they put infrared light beside it, the fourth phase water within the embryo, it shot right back up again, and it
Wow.
kept on moving for hours.
Wow.
And so he said we might need to think about when it is that somebody is actually dead based off
Mm.
these moving potentially. And that was interesting. Again, I mean, I use this word a lot because I'm always fascinated that this there's I think there's a word in Maori called wairua, which means spirit. It means in English two waters, the physical and spiritual waters. It means much more than that. This is just one example. And I think that there is a physical water that hydrates us, that moves through us, that we
Mm.
understand, that we're probably more familiar with within ourselves. And then there is a spiritual water, which is a subtle layer of that.
Mm.
And that subtle water, I think, is connected to spirit
Mm.
always. Now, I don't think we're ever alone. I think that water is our constant companion from the moment we're conceived through fluids
Mm.
to the moment we leave through a type of evaporation. I don't in the hieroglyph that I have for living, like I've used different words
Yeah.
and to identify symbols. The word for living is also the same word for death, because from the perspective of water, water doesn't die. We can say it's dead water, it's polluted water, it's destructured water, it's denatured water. We have all kinds of labels we like to slap onto water.
Mm.
But actually, none of those are true. I mean, perhaps in the moment, but water doesn't die. It will always evaporate and
Mm.
go back to this kind of reincarnation. So, what we see is that from the perspective of water, death is another word for life.
Wow. That's that's really, well, it gives hope and it's reassuring and it's incredible. Where do you see sort of the future of this work and studying going? Because there's so many, like maybe where, I guess there's two questions. Where is it for you, and where do you see it sort of more generally? Because it's vast. We can look at how healing happens. I mean, the answers to life and death, unexplained science, or science that hasn't, mainstream science that hasn't caught up with the fact we are living in an immaterial world, quantum science. It's so vast. What are your thoughts on, yeah, for you personally and for this whole area of research more generally?
Well, really, water has a plan. Water has a voice, and it has a lot to say.
Mm.
So I think that there is regular thought. We often regurgitate a lot of thoughts around in our mind, and then there is inspired thought. When it comes to this work with water, water helps me have inspired thought where something just comes. It's usually when I'm in the shower or something, where it's like, oh, I should do that. I should try this. Like, oh, I should look at this. Water as when you watch tributaries and they're all going in lots of directions and they keep branching off each other until they eventually get to the ocean. Well, I'm seeing water do this with me. There's so many tributaries that can go down. So, I kind of one thing with hydroglyphs, I would say that they are very, very special because they allow us to literally read water, and they can also be two other things. They can be a voice for the voiceless, and they can be, although there's no clinical studies or any of that stuff, I just need to say that, but from my experience and from some other people's experience, they can be like a liquid crystal medicine.
Mm.
So why I say they're the voice for the voiceless is that I was approached by a lady whose child is severely disabled, her daughter, and she can't write, she can't hold her hands together, like she can't hold a pen, and she can't speak properly, she can just make sounds. And the mum was really just, I don't know all of what they went through, but I'm sure it must have been a lot. But she just wanted to know if her child knew how much she was loved. And so she said, look, she told me all the way she got to know about me. And she said, look, if I send you a recording of my daughter, could you play it to the water and can we see what it says? So she asked the daughter, I just want to know, do you know how much you're loved? And then the daughter made sounds that she recorded, and I did the crystallography. And there were 4 hydroglyphs in their petri dish. And there was the hydroglyph, which means individual, which reduces also to mean I. There was the heart, which we know means love. There was the multiplication glyph, which means multiple or a lot. And then there was the earth hydroglyph, which also means mother. So rather
Mm.
than say, I know how much you love me, the child was saying, I love you so much, mummy.
Oh, that makes me want to cry again because I was crying tears when I heard that in Kent, and it's making me cry again. Oh.
And I was fortunate enough to be on a FaceTime when she told the daughter, and her daughter was trying to clap her hands, and it was like, oh my God. And recently also, and you wouldn't have heard the story yet because I did it after Kent. So I do these beginners workshops where I teach people the technique. And so I have, 22 people on a call that I've never met before. And so I teach them, and then we look at their crystallography and I show them, yes, there's this picture or this crystallography or hydroglyphs or whatever, or signature patterns in there. And so it's a very practical workshop. But this one lady, I saw an embryo, which there's a very specific design for embryo, and it's always a light. It's like the shape of the spine is lit with light. It's a very unique look and design. And then there was the multiplication, so many, meaning a lot. And then there's the conception glyph, which is 2 circles that touch, which means conception. It can mean conception of a thought or a child, but usually a child. And she said, no, she, as I was sharing all this, she said, look, you got to stop. You've got to stop. This is freaking me out. I'm like, how come? And she said that she was a cancer survivor and that they had an embryo that she was now able to have implanted, and they were about to do that in 3 days' time. And I've since heard that she's pregnant.
Oh, that's
So
amazing.
amazing. So, I mean, like that's what I mean. I still find it amazing. And the deeper it goes, the more I realize that this isn't just some little thing I do. I'm not just sharing pictures for the fun of it. This is water showing us that there is an intelligence, there is an emotional intelligence there. And
Mm,
perhaps someone once suggested to me, what if water is expressing its consciousness through us and every living thing to observe itself from all perspectives?
mm,
And another interesting aspect that someone I know suggests is that hydrogen might be the spirit of water, and that plasma could be the mind of water, and that water itself could be the body that houses them all. And I think that when you consider how much hydrogen is in the universe, and that even the sun is a giant ball of hydrogen,
mm,
hydrogen itself, hydro and Genesis and hydro, this means the creator of water.
mm,
So when evaporation happens, it is the source bringing the water back home.
mm,
And so this is some very powerful things. You go into different religious texts and indigenous texts, water is always mentioned alongside spirit. So I think the more we dive into this, you asked me where this is going. Well, I've just finished writing my book. So I'm excited to get that to the world because it's my number one asked question. My last publisher went bankrupt and there were only 1,000 copies made, and that was years ago, and they're all gone, and there have been no more. So I have redone the book. I've added so much stuff in because people are like, I want to be able to explain it, but I can't remember everything you said. I just want it all in a book. So I've put it all in a book, and I'm bringing it out next year. So that's a big year for me. And
it's so
it's like,
exciting. That is incredible. Like, I cannot wait to get a copy. Like, seriously exciting stuff.
thank you. And I've changed the name. The book used to be called The Secret Intelligence of Water. And I think it's not a secret. It shouldn't be a secret,
Mm.
I've changed it to water, the language of life, the living language of life.
Mm. That isn't that doesn't that sum it up really? What can I ask you, because I know there's a lot of homeopaths listening to this and they'll probably kill me if I don't ask you. But your new book does have a chapter, doesn't it, on homeopathy? Um
Yes,
do
yes. And I've expanded on some of the stuff that people might have seen on my social media as well. There's a few extra things in there.
do you have any insight? I don't, obviously you must know if you've done studies on homeopathy, you must, I don't know how much knowledge of homeopathy you have, how in depth it is, but do you have any personal views on how or why homeopathy works? We take, for people that are listening that maybe, you use homeopathy but never actually really thought about how it works, you take the substance, you add it to water, one part of it to water, and you succuss it, which is where you shake it, and that's a 1C. Then you take one drop of that and dilute it to the 99 parts of water and shake it vigorously again. And you keep doing that maybe 30 times until you get to, say, a 30C, which is what most people will be using at home. So really, these remedies, it's although they come in pills, people often don't realize, well, no, they're just made in water. It's the whole process. It has to be done in water to release the energy, and the pills are just the carrier. And we still don't really know exactly, there are lots of theories and science is emerging as to how it works. But I feel like your work is so pivotal to helping us, unlock these secrets. Do you have a perspective on how it might, how they might work, or how the energy kind of gets stored?
That's a great question. Well, for the most part, most of the remedies that I used for my study, and it's only a small study, it's not a very big one yet, where it was ones that were in a dilute, like were liquid. So
Mm,
rather than the pills. So that was easy to just put a drop into the water
Mm.
so that it kind of it really helped. I did one with it, which was more of an oil, like a CBD oil. But then I put that onto, that was the only one I did different because I put that on a paper towel. I put the drops on a paper towel and put the dish of water on top of it instead.
Okay.
And got really interesting imagery. But for all the rest were put into water. And I wasn't using distilled water. I'd like to add that. A lot of people use distilled water because they think that it's so pure, like it doesn't have salates in it. But that's not where these remedies are going into. Then we
Mm.
are not water. I wanted to see, what would happen in a water more similar to human waters. So I used spring water, which has minerals and salts within it. And when I used distilled water, I didn't get the same complex imagery as I did when I used spring water. I didn't see the signature patterns of spring water. I saw very specific patterns. What I would see was either something that looked like the remedy itself, like the plant or the whatever it was,
Mm.
or I would see something that looked like a part of the body that was relative to what the remedy helped with. So that was something I kind of consistently saw.
Mm.
Now, what do I think is happening? Well, I used different dilutions. Mostly it was the 30, but one was like 100.
Mm.
And so people might say, well, if it's just so diluted, surely there's like nothing in there, right? And my word doesn't would say to that person, well, actually, I think that there is something in the water. I think there is something there, and it's tangible because we're working with subtle medicines, subtle remedies, and the subtleties are where the power is.
Mm.
It's all of this matrix of life is made of subtleties. What we think is real in our lives, you know, you could ask anybody in the world, is your life real? Are you really real? I mean, that's a big question. Maybe not everybody would answer the same way, but most people would say, yes, my life is real. I am here. Yes, this is my life. I was once a baby and I did all these things and I had this experience and blah, blah, blah. And we have all these experiences, which are all memories, right? Every single one of
Mm.
them is a memory. So your entire life literally is made up of memories. And we consider those memories to make up our lives. They are very real. Our life
Mm.
is real to us based off memories that have happened at every moment of our lives since we remember. So, how do we remember all of those memories? Where are those
Mm.
memories stored? And they're stored within this fluid, liquid system of our intelligent body. So one of the reasons I like to use spring water for this particular work with homeopathy is because the salts help us to store information for longer. They help us store that information. If you took all the salt out of the body, you'd be dead in 48 hours or less.
Mm.
So where's the memory? Like, where's the subtlety? And so the longer something is diluted, let's just say it's a plant, right? So there's a plant, we have this like essence of the plant, and then that gets really diluted. So what is the essence of the plant essentially? So if you
Mm.
think about that, it's like, okay, well, we know there's a physical aspect of an essence, but once it's diluted so much, we're now looking at the subtle aspect of this plant, of the spirit. It becomes the
Mm.
spirit of. Now, many people would say that spirits are real, like the spirit of a human is real, or soul, or subtle body, or many, many words for the same thing. Anything that is living has an essence to it, a living property to it. That living property is held within this spiritual aspect of water that we mentioned a
Mm.
bit earlier. That spiritual aspect of water is very special. It is a little different. And it's different in that it isn't in just only the regurgitation of the stages of evaporation and all these different kinds of things. It's different in that it is actually holding a conscious principle.
Mm.
And that conscious principle of life expands the closer it gets to spirit. So these homeopathic remedies literally are where you're taking a plant, you're getting the essence from the plant, then fusing it into the water. The longer it's diluted, the more there is. So the more you
Mm.
dilute it, the more memory is actually kind of put into the water of that essence, because that essence is becoming more spirit-like.
Mm.
And if you think about that analogy I gave of someone saying that death is like taking off an uncomfortable shoe, there is this huge expansion. So the more that it becomes closer to spirit, the more it expands.
Mm.
So that explains to me why a higher dilution, like the more diluted it becomes, the more it expands this idea of the essence of the spirit. And not only that, once you're kind of teetering on between the physical and the spiritual, which is kind of where homeopathy kind of sits. You're teetering in the in-between places. That also is sort of where embryos are, like babies in the stomach are. They're in the in-between places. It's where the grandparents are when they get near death. Quite often, when someone who has Alzheimer's for many, many years, for example, and they're in their last few hours of death, of life, sorry, they will have full memory all of a sudden. All of a sudden, they'll
Mm.
just remember everything and they'll be able to say goodbye. This has been documented and recorded many, many, many times by people in hospice and various things. And they suddenly get all their memory back. And then they say
Mm.
goodbye and then they pass on. There's a process of letting go. And this is, we're seeing this, I think, within these depths of homeopathy, where we're actually looking a little deeper, where there is this window of being able to be part of both the spirit world and the real world or not the real world, or the material world, should we say, where information exchange is actually freely given on both ways.
Mm.
And I think this is an extremely powerful place and subtle uh, space, which I think needs to be given more attention. And I hope that in the future, people will study subtle medicine and study energetics far deeper, especially within the
Mm.
realms of water, because water is in so many different stages.
Mm.
And what's interesting with homeopathy is that it's kind of like there's these fluid aspects, but then they come into a solid as well. They can be a pool, like you say, they can be different things. So, when you have something that's come into the physical in a little pill and combined with something like sugar, for example, when you freeze sugar, when you dilute sugar in water and freeze it, depending on the different type of sugar it is, you'll see different types of hexagons. So
Mm.
the more pure the sugar is, the larger the hexagonal patterns are, these little star patterns. The if it's white sugar, you see lots of tiny little stars. The bigger the hexagons, the healthier the energetic state of water is. The
Mm.
so you see that white processed sugar tends to form littler hexagons, but then you get into sucral and like fake sugars, and you start to see a lot of disorder.
Mm.
So, you start kind of bringing in aspects of living properties. So we have sugars, we have salts, we have these various things within life force energy. So you have these little balls of life force energy. That's what I think about when I'm thinking of homeopathy, because you have the essence of the living principle of a plant or whatever the remedy is,
Mm.
combined with the physicality of this embodiment of life.
I love the way you described that. And actually, that word that you said, expansiveness with the more dilutions, that's why if you take something that's really diluted, like a 10M, which has been diluted 10,000 times. You can go back even to ancestral patterns. It's like way beyond, a 60 is maybe physical stuff, but because it hasn't expanded as much. And that just, as you were saying that, I was like, yeah, you're just explaining exactly why the dilutions, the higher diluted, the more you're working on that spiritual, emotional, or even ancestral level.
Well, that's why I think that ancestral information is held within the amniotic fluid. I
Mm.
actually think that that is the potent place of information exchanged between the ancestors and the baby. They often, in some indigenous cultures, the babies and the grandparents or the great grandparents, they spend a lot of time together because both of them are closest to where they both closest in that moment to where they came from.
Mm.
And I think that there's real beauty in that and truth in that.
Oh, Veda, it's amazing how much this time has just literally flown by, and I could chat to you for hours about so much more, but I'm really conscious of your time, and we've gone over and we chatted before, which was amazing. So, is there anything like there's probably loads, but just to finish up on that you want to share that we haven't discussed, or I'd like you to also, if you're able to let people know how to get in touch or what you've got in store. But is there anything like parting words of wisdom that you'd like to end on before we wrap up?
There's always there's so much to share. But I think one of the things that I like that I really that water's shown me that I use for my own advice sometimes is that there was a little series I did where I was putting seeds into water. For example, I put a seed into water for 30 seconds removed and did the crystallography. And rather than show me a picture of a seed, water read the potential of the seed and designed the sunflower because I put a
Oh,
sunflower seed. When I put a flax seed in, it designed the pods, which are essentially the fruit of the flax seed. And it's also where the flax seed comes from. And when I put a pistachio shell only into the water and removed it, it designed the shell only.
amazing.
So water is reading the potential of life.
Mm.
And we have, by molecular count, not by volume, 99% water. There are trillions of water molecules within our body. In fact, there's more water molecules in our bodies than stars in the Milky Way. And every single one of those water molecules knows your potential and is in a constant waiting,
Mm.
ready to fully embrace that potential the moment you decide to take that on or move towards that. It already knows everything you can do and more. And sometimes, when you feel alone and when you think that nobody cares, you have trillions of water molecules that care about you and only you. They are there for you, for your best interest, because water won't design an environment of anger or frustration. It won't design any complex imagery, not out of judgment, because it doesn't resonate at that frequency. So you have this absolutely incredibly vast liquid system within you that is reading every positive, uplifting potential you have. And you only need to just take one little tiny step to be able to see how far water will show you who you are and who you can be and how incredible you are. We look so much into the mirror at the physical, but we're looking through water. Our eye lens is 99% water. With all the crystallography I've done, some of the hardest things sometimes to see and think is that water is reflecting you because it's so amazing. It's so beautiful. It's so expansive and it's so clever. And all of these things are also us. And we are all connected. Some of the most beautiful changes in tap water that I've seen have come from 64 people around the world sending love to my little tap water in my petri dish in New Zealand. It transformed into some of the clearest, most beautiful hexagonal patterns that looked like pristine spring water. And that was only
Chills as you saying that. That's just incredible. Just amazing.
64 people. Imagine how much. I always think we have on the surface of Earth between 1 to 2% drinking water. I'm not talking about primary water within the Earth's mantle. That's a whole nother conversation. But on the surface of Earth, there's only about 2% potable drinking water. We only need that much percent of people as a collective to make such huge waves around this world that things will never be the same. They will change so profoundly. And that's what water wants. It doesn't want to flood the world like one big giant flood again. It wants to flood the hearts of people. And that's my parting words.
Veda, that is beautiful. Thank you so much. I've got full chills. You make me so excited about the future of the world and just what an incredible time it is to be alive, and the discoveries, or should I say the rediscoveries maybe, that are being made. It's just exciting, and you're just such an incredible soul, and we're so lucky, all of us, to have you. So thank you so much for everything you do. Is there
It's my
how Oh, thank you so much. How, if people want to, I shared your Instagram account earlier, but can you share just the best way to get in touch or follow your work and hear about your exciting news that's coming up in
yeah,
due
of
course?
course. Well, Instagram is just my name, Veda Austin _water. And my email is very unoriginal. I mean, sorry, my website is just vedaaustin.com. And Facebook's Veda Austin at Water Researcher.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you coming on. And I know people are gonna love this. And this is the final episode of this season of Raw Health Rebel. And just what a way to go out. So yeah, really grateful, Veda. Thank you so much.
I hope to see you again in the UK when I come over there in October.
Definitely.